the man of the hour. Thank you.
I'm going to Sea Isle City's history. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, how's this? Oh, ominous. Sea Isle City's history goes back to the last ice age, when our beach was 200 miles further to the east. Sea Isle City's history involves the first tourist. There was the Lenni Lenape Native Americans, the Comanche tribe, which not Comanche, it's this Comanche, I can't pronounce it. But they would come here, as we do, to enjoy the summer at the shore. It was summertime and the living is easy. If you're a Native American, they counted their lives. They didn't have a calendar. They counted them in summers, because if you made it through to another summer, life was good. But I'm going to talk about just briefly how Sea Isle City came to be a tourist destination, and why most of us come and enjoy and are here tonight, I'm sure many of you. And it started with, as a lot of history has engines, and one of the engines is the great man or the great woman, the founder, the visionary. Charles K. Landis took a trip to Italy in the late 1800s. He went to Venice, and he came back here, and he decided, he bought Ludlam Island from the Ludlams, and he decided to create Sea Isle City, a little Venice. Fish Alley, once upon a time, was known as Venetian Park. The idea was that and he ran out of time, he went to his great reward, and money, but his son did finish the lagoons. Later we added 48th Street, but all the rest of those, the idea was the gondolas were going to go under Park Road. So the visionary was followed by a technological innovation, which was the railroads. The railroads decided to increase ridership, to have excursion fares to the barrier islands. They would come to Sea Isle City. It was $1.50 round trip, $1.50, and you could actually get a summer pass for $50 where you could come and go as you pleased. And people would come to Sea Isle on the excursion train, get off where the post office is now, and they would walk with their lunch in their shoebox, thus the shoebie term, and they'd walk over to where we are right now. The original excursion park had the excursion house, which was 4 levels, and the bottom level is where you changed into your bathing suit. The other influences that created this, what we know today, were, one was a social innovation, the other was cultural. Social was Teddy Roosevelt became an accidental president when McKinley was assassinated, and he brought in the progressive era where labor movement got rights for their workers, and it trickled down and to other workers as well. Businesses and industry didn't want you to unionize, so they said, we'll give you what they got. You can have the 8-hour workday, you can have weekends off, and you can have vacations. Vacation, that word comes from the Latin to vacate your premises, your home. Because once upon a time,
with him,
only the wealthy could go somewhere else. Pompeii in Italy was a place that the wealthy went to in the summer heat. And that brings me to the cultural. The cultural aspect is that people have always been interested in the lives of the rich and famous. And what did the people who had the money? They came to the shore. In 1900, Sea Isle City was incorporated the first time in 1882. We had 30 hotels, more than Cape May. The cultural thing was that the ministers told you it was good for your soul, it was good for you to recreate and to spend time with your loved ones, go to the shore. Health professionals told you the salt air, the salt water, it was good for you. So it was the confluence of these four phenomena that created Sea Isle City as a tourist destination. That, however, is only a tip of the iceberg. We're constantly pulling threads and finding new things. Sea Isle City, of all places, will have, soon, we will have a plaque on the Black Heritage Trail. Because in 1909 and 1910, the Niagara movement, the precursor to the NAACP, came to Sea Isle City for their meetings. And they stayed. They were here up until 1919 in regular. Black people came here. And the Civil Rights Movement in 1910, it was announced by W.E.B. Du Bois that Sea Isle City, at the Methodist Church, which was then at 45th Street, that we were moving on from the Niagara movement because it wasn't getting things done, and we were going to be part of this new organization just recently formed in New York City, and that was the NAACP. So Sea Isle City's history is much broader than you can possibly think. And one of the things that constantly changes is the weather. And the storms that we have had are basically what is urban renewal for Sea Isle City. So Joe is going to talk about the 62 storm, because the 62 storm was one of the most, if not the most momentous storms to ever hit Sea Isle City and many other places as well. So that's just a little brief. I'll be back in a bit to give you my personal storm story. And then we're going to ask Eddie and all of you who are here tonight who may have your own storm story. No matter how, brief or long or you feel it may be inconsequential, we're interested. We'd like to hear your story, and we are recording tonight. So those stories will be recorded, and we will add them to our storm collection. So without further ado, here's Mary Pat to introduce her principal.
Thank you. Thanks, Chuck. If any of you have nothing better to do on a Friday afternoon from 12:30 to 3, that is his shift. You will come out knowing so much more. Again, the mission of the museum is to share, save, archive, and educate about Sea Isle's history. And like Pat said, it goes all the way back to Charles Landis, who went to Italy in the late 1800s, came back wanting to turn Sea Isle into Venice. It's a crazy concept. But like I said earlier, how Linda and I met wonderful people last year, I need 3 little people to come up here and help me. William, Peter, and Francis, would you be willing to come up on stage with me? You guys are so brave. These are 3 of the 4 wonderful kids I met last year. And William, Peter, and Francis. Little sister Helen, she's 4. We influenced these guys to start their own family album. Like when you think of these family albums, it's like the Mike Monachetti album, it's this thick. And we were trying to explain to these kids, your history starts today. For every picture you take this summer, next summer it will be history. So I just wanted to call on these guys, and do you guys think you could help me sing happy birthday? That's going to be the way I introduce my wonderful principal, Joe LaRosa, whose birthday is on Tuesday. So, to introduce Joe, can we please sing him a happy birthday? Da-da-da-da-da!
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Joey. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you so much. Afterwards, we're in no hurry to get out of here. We're not rushing you out. Joe does have both his books on this table to sign for you if you'd like to purchase one. Oh, also at the table, Pat has made a collection of articles and pictures. And over here, I don't think my husband knows what he's doing, but he's making it look good. And thank you to you. I asked Joe, I said, who's that guy sitting next to my husband? He goes, some guy. I said, what's your name? Thank you so much for manning the table. Also, I want to say thank you to Matt Arch He also was hired by Joe LaRosa at Dennis Township. And when I called Matt at, 10:30 this morning? Hey, what are you doing tonight? And he was willing to come out and videotape this. And to Trish, thank you to the city for letting us do this. Thank you for making this such a nice turnout. We're hoping to do this maybe every year, present a different piece of history. So until then, can you guys say, Joe, start your show.
You can start your show now.
Wow, it's some kind of introduction. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Padula.
You're welcome, Dr. LaRosa.
Okay, the March 1962 storm. A couple things I want to just go over real quick. I'm kind of waiting for it to get darker. Thank you to Pat Hafford, of course, but I'm going to show my age. About 56 years ago this August, there was a Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Stephen Stills said to a concert, this is, and I'm referring to Pat and I, the only second time we've ever done this, and we are scared to death. So just bear with us, laugh at our jokes, and be nice. I want to get something very, very serious right now. There was a series of storms in Texas, and I'd like to have a moment of silence for all those kids and all the people in Texas, and additionally to all the storm survivors from Sea Isle City that are no longer with us that helped put the books together. So please, a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Now this 62 storm was a very serious event, but as we get farther away from it, what happens is we kind of remember the funny things, the humorous things. So if I know that Pat has a couple things that are humorous, but if you think about it, it's deadly serious. But it's okay to laugh at jokes. It's okay to laugh at us. It's fine. I got a couple notes, so I don't want to forget anything. The edges have rubbed off. As I do this presentation, I want everyone to just think about one thing, and that is there was no such thing as FEMA. That didn't start until President Carter back in '76. No one had flood insurance because it was so darn expensive. So if you lost your car, you lost your car. If you lost your house, you lost your house. If you lost the tools that you made your living with, you lost your tools that you make a living with. So that's important to know. And as we go a little bit, I'm going to give you a brief, quick what we're doing. We're going to try, and we did already, a snapshot of Sea Isle City. I'm going to go over day 1, then we're going to have Pat's story, then we're going to have day 2 and 3, and then changes that were brought about by the 62 storm. And then after this is over, we'll all be available for questions. It's going to run probably from start to finish a little over 90 minutes. So if you have to leave, leave. You have to get up and go. I hope it's interesting. I hope that we do a good job. So just kind of bear with us. Now, before I get started, does anyone know, March 1962, what the top movie was that week? I never heard of it either. Okay, it's Doris Day and Rock Hudson, second movie they ever did together, and it was called Lover Come Back. So that's what people were watching back then as we were getting kind of beat up. Now, the storm happened on March 6th, 7th, and 8th. It's also known as the Ash Wednesday storm because it occurred on Ash Wednesday. But in Sea Isle City, people who experienced it just refer to it as the storm. And as we get farther away from the storm, it is now the 62 storm. And at this time, I'm just going to ask, are there any storm survivors? If you are a storm survivor, if you could stand up. If you were here in Sea Isle in '62, because I see a lot of familiar faces. Okay, take a look around to everyone and make note of who is standing, because everyone has a story. Everyone has a story to tell. Yes, he did. Okay, now this is a photograph. And it happened actually around 37th and the Beach, right here on Pleasure. It was a public works garage. The reason I have this This was the cover of my first book. My father was the assistant superintendent of public works, so that means it was a different world. On Saturdays and at lunchtimes when I was off from school, I'd hop in the truck with him and we'd drive all around Sea Isle. I would drive up and down the boardwalk in the morning. I got to know all the adults, I got to know all the people. So it was actually pretty personal when this event happened that wiped everything out. But it also gave me a frame of reference as to who was doing what. So I kind of know. But that truck is a truck that my father and I used to go riding around in, and the boat, it was repaired. It weighed probably 500 pounds, and we had to cart it up and down the beach on rollers, the same way that 4,000 years ago the pyramids were built. That's how we carried the boat up and down the beach. Okay, the storm was a series of 6 tide cycles that struck Sea Isle City over a 3-day period. The first high tide was the morning of March 6th. It was not a hurricane. It was a northeaster. I'm going to teach you how, if you were raised in Sea Isle, just going to give you a little thing. Does anyone know, as you drive into Sea Isle, what all that grass is? Anyone want to tell you? No? No? Nobody? Okay. It's not the marshes. It's not the wetlands. It's called the meadows. So if you were from Sea Isle, you refer to that as the meadows. Same thing with the waterways that are on Venetian Road and 42nd Place. They're not lagoons. They're not waterways. If you were born and raised in town, we called them canals. So, giving you a little bit. Same thing with Northeast. It's not a nor'easter. That's for writers and people in New England. In Sea Isle, it's just a northeaster, or it's blowing northeast. Okay? Now, what happened is this northeaster was pretty good, and it came on a perigene spring tide. The moon goes around the earth kind of in an oval, and it was the time when the moon was closest to earth, and that had a very dynamic impact on the tides. I'm a storm survivor, and again, because of my father and driving around, the storm had a profound impact, and my childhood memories have inspired me to write the 2 books. Our Perfect Storm is an annotated history. It is a history book. Everything has 2, 3, 4 sources. The second book is Storm Stories. When I did research for the first book, I spoke with so many of the old timers and so many of my friends and my father's friends, and they all had stories. And my friends had stories. And I said, wow, you know, if we don't write these down, it's going to be lost forever. So that's what that is. The second book is just a collection of oral histories, and it was designed in a way it will give you a comprehensive view of how the storm hit and what was happening. Now, Sea Isle City, 60 census was 1,393 people, full-time residents. And this is where the Ore House is now, with the Pounds Nets Fishing Company. You notice the name. Got my cousin Pat over there, cousin John. Pound Nets Fish Company. There's my Uncle Manny cleaning the day's catch at the Ore House. So we had a thriving fishing industry. We had a publishing industry that Pat could probably talk about. And it was a great, great, great community to live and a great place to grow up. Now, the infrastructure, Landis Avenue went the length of the island, okay? Central Avenue went from about 36th Street to 59th Street, where the football field is now, soccer field. And then it stopped. It was a dirt road till about 67th Street, then there was meadows, just nothing left. There was little development past 56th Street South and 36th Street North. The area was all marsh and meadows. Now here's a great picture after the storm showing you the promenade. You can see the, well, here we go. I'm really good with technology. Here's the end of the original promenade at right 40th Street. Here's where the water tower is now. That's the old water tower. Here's the bridge coming into town. And you can see that there's no development back in here, none. And this is what, Ness, Roberts Avenue back here. And here's the bridge. There's no development here. This here was our fishing business, so that's what we had. Now, Pleasure Avenue ran roughly where it's now located, in the blocks of 60th and 70th Street. And it was just a twisty road because it wasn't paved. It was just a dirt path you ever go down Pleasure Avenue and like this in the 60s and 70s? It's because it was going around the sand dunes. And then after a while, they just put gravel down and they paved it, but they kept it all twisty. Oh, wrong one. Anyone have an idea what that is for frame of reference? Don't all holler. Okay, Acme, thank you. That's the Acme, okay? As you can see, there's a dirt road at Central Avenue where it stops. This is Frida Real Estate. Here's Pleasure Avenue, and now where it starts to go twisty and then kind of heads up this way. Take note of these sand dunes because I have a couple photographs that aren't here. And if you notice here, there's very little development. This was all owned by the city, as was this owned by the city, as was this owned by the city. And as everyone knows, this is all developed. Right about here is where the football field is, and that's where they had the major, they built a fire to get rid of the debris. Let me put this someplace. All right. Okay, most of the streets in the 60s and 70s, again, were not built between Pleasure and Landis. The area was all sand dunes and meadows. There was no Central Avenue. There was little to no development from about 36th Street going north. Access to the mainland was a drawbridge that was located at 44th and Venetian Road. And that's it. And this is where the bridge tender was. And when the commercial boats would come through, the fishing boats, they'd have to raise it and lower it. You gave three toots, and Mr. Coulter would come out and raise the bridge. The city had a wooden plank boardwalk that ran from 40th to 44th Street, and it was full of attractions. And that's what I was saying. My dad and I would drive up and down the boardwalk in the city truck, and it was right there. Here's a picture of the boardwalk from looking north from 43rd Street. This is the Madeline Theater. This is, of course, the boardwalk. This would be Fiends Hotel right here, Mike's Hot Dogs. This is, and we're going to have a quiz on this later. This is the Windsor Hotel. The largest building on the land side of the boardwalk was the Excursion House, located on the northeast corner of 45th Street, JFK Boulevard, and the boardwalk. And now it's the site of, and we are located at Excursion Park. The building was actually over in the back where those people are sitting with the bicycle. That's kind of where it was. It was on the corner. But we lost a lot of beach here. So this is the last known picture of the boardwalk taken from 45th Street looking north. This is the fishing pier. This had been knocked down in 1944. This wasn't damaged in 62. It was taken during the first tide. There was a movie house built on a pier over the ocean at 42nd and the beach. And it's the Madeline Theater, and it was huge. And then it had the fishing pier, as I said. And that's a picture of it. Now here's another good picture of it right here. And you can see how big it was in relationship to everything. Here's Kennedy Boulevard. We are about here now. Here's the Excursion House. There was a bowling alley here, donut bar, Windsor Hotel, Fiends Hotel, Putt Putt, Mike's Hot Dogs. And the reason I know that is because I used to ride my bike up and down the boardwalk, and I was a friend of Dottie Fiend. They used to feed me. I was a friend of Mrs. Podick. She ran the golf course. She let me play. My best friend, Kenny Rocap's uncle, was Mike of Mike's Hot Dogs. They used to feed us. My mom worked at the Windsor Hotel. She used to feed me. So I kind of have a really good memory. Sea City had a full 54-bed hospital. Mercy Hospital was located at Landis Avenue between 58th and 59th Street. There is a picture of Mercy Hospital. We're going to talk a little bit about a fire that happened. The switchboard was located right behind this wall, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. Sea City woke up to massive flooding on March 6, 1962, and it was apparent right away this was an unusual flooding event. Now here's a picture kind of from where we are. This is the front of the Ocean Drive. This is the old Azo Motel that's still there. This was taken from where the new steakhouse is, used to be Shuby's. Again, looking down, what's that, 39th Street, 40th Street? The flooding was a surprise event. Channel 3, 6, 10, that's all we had for television. None of them knew about it. It took everyone by surprise. And the way the New Jersey State Police used to communicate to everyone in the state was way before cell phones and radios and satellites. They had a teletype machine, which was a giant typewriter which spit out stuff to every one of the units. And when it started flooding in Cape May Courthouse station, they said, it's flooding, but no evacuations are anticipated. That is the morning of the 6th from my front porch. We just thought it was a 1 or 2 day thing, so I wasted all the film taking silly pictures. But I had a picture of this. I thought it was a big deal. Later on in the day, a house came floating by. The house was a little bungalow, had a porch on it, was attached. There was chairs rocking on the front porch, and there was a lamp in the window. And my mom was going ballistic because she understood what I didn't. There was immediate damage to the city's oceanfront. The Sisters of Mercy's convent was damaged, and Milano's house on 54th Street was knocked down. The tide did not recede totally. Now this is important. The evening tide came in over top of it. It was a very strong winds and a very hard rain came at the city. By evening, many of the houses had lost telephone service because it was all done by wire, and they lost electric service. City fathers are getting together. Fire is a major concern, so they had 5 fire trucks. They put 2 in the center of town, 2 in the middle of town, and 1 in Townsend's Inlet. And one of the trucks, if you ever go down to the firehouse, and my wife's going to kill me, but it's my favorite truck, there's a 1927 Hale that used to run the fires back then. So the second tide was higher than the first, and now we're looking for high ground and electricity, and the wind and the rain were relentless. It was raining sideways, and it was hurricane-esque winds. Now this wasn't a hurricane, but boy was it in the Northeast. And at the end of the Madeline Theater got knocked down. Fire hits the telephone switchboard at the hospital, an alarm sounded, and it's carried word of mouth. Firemen respond, but due to high water, the equipment cannot reach the hospital. A crew is dispatched from the United States Coast Guard base at Townsend's Inlet to assist. Now, the hospital is on 59th and Landis. Dispatched at 4:15, they reached the hospital at 7 o'clock. That's how high the tide was. Thankfully, the fire was extinguished by personnel. And at this time, I would like to hand it over to my partner in crime, Mr. Pat Hafford.
So there are elements of my story that are, can we hear you okay? Elements of my story that are common to all of the other storm survivors. And there are things like you're moving around, you're trying to get away from the storm, your strangers are taking you in, or if not strangers, people you knew, but not well enough to knock on the door. I'm here, take us in. So our day begins March 6th, the early storm, the first tide. And what happens is, when we were kids, we were always watching the 3 channels from Philadelphia, and the winter storms were coming and school was going to close. Not down here. Because of typically, it didn't go much beyond the 95 corridor. It may get as far west as, and south as Millville and Vineland. We were always getting cheated. My cousins, my friends, the summer friends we called them, the people that were coming from Philadelphia, they were always getting off. Well, finally, we had to laugh on them because we woke up that morning and we had water around our house. We never had water around our house before. And it really wasn't a house. My father had bought an old hotel. Originally it was called the Seminole Hotel for the Seminole Native Indian tribe. And he carved out an apartment in that structure for our family. So we woke up and we were told by my mother, they've called from the school, you're off today. This was going to be a great day. Until it wasn't. So what happens, we have a family business. It was a publishing company, and my cousin Michael was serving Mass. He was an altar boy, and my uncle Bill and my aunt Jean took him. They were down on the bay side, and they came and they went to Mass, and in the short period, they had noticed the water was much higher than they thought. But after Mass was over, they could not get back down to their home at 345 45th Place in Seattle. So they went over to the Garden State Publishing Company. We had a publishing company. We published trade magazines. And fortunately, Uncle Bill went in there, and a wire had tripped, and one of the letter presses were running. So call went out to Fred Forkman, where's Dale? Dale's over there, to emergency, get over here. I don't know how they got to it, because the water was already inundating the printing plant. So my grandparents, who were also on 45th Street, but at a low spot, were also having issues. So the phone calls went around, and my father invited, because we had a hotel, a rooming house. There were 3 apartments, including ours, and then 8 rooms. My father invited the entire family over to come to our place on 50th Street and the beach. It was called Marine Place back in those days. And we had heat, they didn't. We had electricity, they were losing theirs, and this is true of many storm survivors. You moved sometimes just because it was March, it was still cold. So the whole family comes over for the day. This was going to be, it was only getting better. Now my cousins are coming over, and the grandparents. This is just going to be a great day. So they get over, and we're in the house, and things are progressing. We had a big picture window. It was about 8 by 8, and it looked right over the ocean. So we had a front row seat for the storm watch. Early in the evening, we had 2 dogs. They had brought over their dog, Tubber, but our dog had to go out to do his business. This is our Runsell. So we let Runsell out, and then an hour goes by, another hour and a half. No Runsell. What happened to Runsell? Well, now my father has noticed that the storm is very unusual. We're seeing waves that we've never seen before. The rain, as he said, is coming sideways. And he said, so we start, what happened to Runsell? We can't find Runsell, never came back. And of course my father did the old parent defense thing. Don't you worry about that dog. Animals have survival instincts. He went to high ground. Yes, that's what he did. Because he knew, the last thing in the world he needed was these whiny kids on top of this increasingly horrible storm situation. So as we progressed the storm, we had French doors down in the lobby of the hotel. Wave broke through, and water came in washing right through the lobby, pushing all the furniture around. So my father and my uncle and my older brother Joe at 17, they were down there to try to finally nail it shut. They were trying. And that we had never even seen water of that magnitude. And it was getting really seriously what you would consider to be out of hand. The waves would hit the bulkhead and jump over it, but then that would wash out all the fill that was behind the bulkhead. Then it started to rip through the bulkhead, and the waves were coming over or through, and they would run underneath the structure. The structure was on cedar piles. Back in those days, you just drove cedar piles to refusal, which wasn't deep enough. Now, you have to go much deeper if you have a home on the beach for scouring purposes. Back then, there was no code to speak of, and this was built before that. So what happens now, every time a wave, and they're coming, boom, 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 comes rushing under the hotel, the entire building shook. It was very eerie. And then we were getting ready for dinner, and the children were going to be fed in the kitchen, and the adults were going to eat in the dining room. I was back in the kitchen with my mother, and all of a sudden, this structure, which was 3 stories high, and we had 14-foot ceilings, so it's a pretty high structure, all of a sudden, the entire building lurched forward on a 15-degree angle. The waves had scoured out the pilings in the front, and the building started to fall, but it stopped. We were all thrown to the floor. I was in the kitchen, all of the kitchen. It was like that scene for the Titanic, you know, you ever see the movie? All the cabinets opened, and all the dishes and the glasses, the pots, and the things are flying out and crashing, and you're down on the floor, and we are in the pitch dark. And it was at this point that my father decided to reveal the meticulous, well thought out, and well planned evacuation plan, which was, run, run for your lives. Literally, that was it. My father was not an excitable person, but he got up, and I still remember, it was very eerie, the way his voice sounded. And he said to my mother, Helen, take the children and run. So my mother, this is chaos. There was no adult sent with us. My grandfather fell to the floor and lost his glasses, and he and my brother Joe are crawling around in the living room trying to find the glasses. My brother Mark and my cousin Michael immediately split. They got to the back door. We had fortunately built a new entrance. My mother always wanted a private entrance, and it was a lifesaver because the guy built it really securely, and it was on the back side of the building. Otherwise, we would have had to walk down to the bottom floor of the building where the waves were coming in and go out that way. So what happened was the door jammed because of the building shifting. So they threw their body into it, and it was a screen door with the glass in it now, and it went flying, the wind caught it, glass shattered. And then my mother said that it was my cousin Jan, who is here, and my brother Greg, her dog Tubber. So Jan's on my right hand, and she's got Tubber in her hands. I've got Greg. Now the water's roughly up to when we get out into this water, it's freezing cold, by the way, and yet I still can't remember feeling the cold. Joe said it was in the 50s. And then Greg and my mother said to us, go the way you always did. In other words, don't go the long way around, cut through the yards and jump through the fences. So the 3 of us and the dog are traversing away from the storm and going towards the only other house. This is Sea Isle City in the winter. The Bednareks on 51st Street, one house in from Pleasure, were the only other house on the street. So we were heading over to the Bednarik house. So we get over the fences, and Jan goes over, and I hold the dog, and I give the dog to Jan, and then we throw Greg across over, and we get to the Bednarik house. Because we were coming the back way, we were in their backyard, we went up their back steps, which to the kitchen, and we bang on the door. The door opens, and I forget which is Mrs. Bednarik, I think, greets us, and there is one other greeter there that we're familiar with, Runsell the dog. He's been there for hours. And this, it's nice and warm. He's got a little blanket to sleep on. He's got food. He's got his girlfriend Tammy, which was their dog. And at this point in life, I was 10 days short of my 13th birthday. And at this point, the esteem for Runsel the dog was going in this direction. He knew when to get out of Dodge. He knew not to invite his entire family over. The esteem for my father, on the other hand, let's bring the whole family over for a storm watch and we can all die together. Going in the opposite direction, of course. So we were then safely ensconced in the Bednarik house. However, in the confusion, the menfolk went over to 49th Street where my maternal grandparents had a home. So they go in one direction. My mother and my Aunt Jean, my godmother, and my grandmother are coming, but they're coming the longer way around. So they're still closer to the storm surge. One of the things, and you'll hear other storm survivors talk about this, it was the noise. It was a din. That the noise never ever stopped. It wasn't just the rain or the crashing waves. The first time around, the first tides, this was the second one, it was taking things like porches and garages and sheds, and just those type of things were smashed, and debris, it was in the water full of debris when we walked over, and this crashing of material into other houses. So it was just this unrelenting noise and the howling wind. And after a brief period, my mother and my grandma, none of the adults showed up. And you couldn't hear. But what we did know is that the house started to fall down. So I thought the worst, and I started to cry. I started banging my head on the wall. I was just a little kid, and I thought they had all, bought the farm. So eventually, it's a slow march for them because they have my grandmother. And of course, there's always funny stories that come out of this. So my Aunt Jean and my mom always told the story. They were coming along around, and my grandmother sees a telephone pole, and she reaches out and she grabs the telephone pole, wraps her arms around, and turns to her daughters-in-law and says, "Go on, leave me, I'm old, save yourself." They're peeling her arms. "Mother, we're going on." Together, they peel her arms off the telephone pole, and then we eventually get over to the house, and then we're reunited. At that point, I think my mother, the supposition was, or she may have known, the menfolk had gone another way. So now we are, for my family, this is our first new place to be in the storm. But for my relatives that were joining us, the extended family, they now have gone from their house to our house to the Bednarik house, and it hasn't been a 24-hour day yet. So that night, we spent in the Bednarik house, and then so we're in the front bedroom, which is up on 51st Street. So we went, and all the boys because they had 2 boys, and now it's 4 of us with Michael. So there's 6 boys in a double bed. We get up in the morning and we run to the other side of the house to see how our building has fared. And there it is at this ridiculous 15-degree angle, but it's still standing. And little kid-like, we all cheered. Yeah, the old cheer went up. And then an hour or so later, my father shows up at low tide. You could get around Sea Isle on a flatbed truck because it was high enough, or by motorboat if you avoided the low spots. And Pleasure Avenue was high. That's where the old railroad used to run down to TI. So they built on top of that, so it's high, and the Oceanside is typically higher on Sea Isle than, as you get towards the bay, it's shallow. So he comes and he evacuates all of us. He backs the truck up to the steps. And I remember Mrs. Bednarik, she's leaving her, she starts to cry because she's leaving her house, not knowing whether she's ever going to see this house again. So all the Bednarik family, my extended family, my mother and my aunt and my cousins and my siblings, get on this flatbed truck and we head over to 53rd Street. The Bednariks stay, knock on the door for the Loges now. Remember, you can't call ahead of time and say, oh gee, we're refugees from the storm. Is it okay if we can come to your house? You get a knock on the door, and there are these wet people, with the clothes on their back, and in they go. They took them, and we went to the Lewis's funeral home, which was fortuitous because they had more bathrooms. In those days, we had one bathroom in our 4-bedroom apartment. They had the bathrooms also for the funeral home downstairs. There was you couldn't flush the toilets after a while. So everything it was disgusting, just built up. And, we got young kids and, but what happened was because we had extra bathrooms, it worked out, that we were at the Lewis Funeral Home. So this day, now my parents got together. What do you do when you think you may lose everything? My father got together with my mother at low tide, and they made a list. What do you save? I remember my mother saying afterwards, she never thought about photos. They were thinking about jewelry and important records and things of that nature. So my father and my mother made out a list, and then at the next low tide, this was on the high tide, at the next low tide, he and his good friend Lonnie Peterson, who used to own Mary Ann's Bakery here, because he had a big, extended ladder, they went over to the property after that high tide. It was on the low tide. And my father returned shortly after he had left and announced that it was a pile of rubble. It was gone. We had escaped with the clothes on our back. There was no flood insurance. You lost your car, you lost your home, you lost every possession that you had. Gone with the wind and the rain and the storm. And this again, others, the same experience. It was the following day that we were now going to be evacuated by helicopter to get out of Seattle. The only way to get out of Seattle was by boat, and you can't take a whole town and evacuate it. So it was, I think Joe will fill you in correctly, it was either the Navy and the Air Force. And they would come, the helicopters came to where the Acme is, and where the Coast Guard station is, the one on the Landis Avenue, up at 82nd or 83rd Street, and the VFW, right where JFK Boulevard is. And that is where my mother and my siblings and my cousins and my aunt, men stayed in town, and Joe will tell you more about that. They opened for the next season. They just came together and they just put debris on trucks and took it down, and there was a fire that never went out for the next 4 months. It burned down at where Dealey Field is. So that is, and then we went to live with relatives for the next few weeks. So that's basically my story. When you hear from other people, it's very similar. It's this no communication. You don't know what happened to, like I said, I thought the adults were gone.
I'm okay. Thank you.
Moving from one place to the next place. Then eventually we're taken out by helicopter. And one last thing on my helicopter ride, there had been, Joe probably mentioned it, there had been a bus. People had decided we'll get off the island, we'll go out at low tide with the bus. You think it would be high enough. And they went out and the bus stalled. And they all had to walk back, women, children, and the men that were leading the expedition, back to Seattle. And when I was flying out, it was my first helicopter ride. I was this, you're a kid. I was excited. I looked down, and it looked like, because at high tide, the bus, all you could see was the roof of the bus. It looked like a gigantic orange surfboard. And then we got a short, brief ride, and then my sister and her husband were waiting for us, and off we went. So hopefully we'll be able to have time to hear from others, but like I say, there's commonality to these stories, but it was something that you experience even as a child. I look at it differently now, of course, as an adult, but even as a kid, I knew this was something really, really big. So I'll turn this back to Joe now. Joseph?
Thank you. Okay, Ash Wednesday, the rain is easing, but the wind's not abating. It's only the wind is getting stronger. The morning tide overwhelms the entire city. The water in the bay has no place to go. So where does it go? Right back to the ocean, completely through the city. So a lot of the debris and a lot of the damage was done that way. Now, here's something, I'm going to try this here. These are wave heights, and this is roughly New Jersey. And if you could follow this around, you'll see it was between 35 and 40 foot waves that were hitting Sea Isle City. Okay, Cape May County Emergency Management decides to evacuate the hospital. Helicopters are called from the Navy and the Coast Guard to assist. Patients are removed to Cape May Courthouse, to Burdett Tomlin, which is now Cape Regional, and to Crest Haven. As the winds intensify, emergency management decides to also evacuate women and children from the island. Again, loaded school buses attempted. There was a number of school buses that tried. The one bus is stranded and can't move. Some people wade back to Ocean View. Eventually, one of the buses turned around and did make it back to Sea Isle. We have one of the survivors from one of the buses who didn't get off the island. He's here. Right, Len? And the people who walked through the water all reached safety in Ocean View. Here's a photograph, not a good one, but of a Coast Guard helicopter. This is taken from the Garden State Parkway, looking south. Here is Sea Isle Boulevard. So United States Coast Guard flying evacuees to the ball field in Ocean View. Now, most of the island is without electric or phone service. The city's water and sewer system fail. Broken water mains at the street ends can't be capped, and the sewers are inundated by floodwaters. So fresh water is gushing out. Floodwater is clogging all of the, as Pat said, you can't use the toilets. There's no water. And the rain and the wind do begin to die down, but the relentless surf continues to pound the ocean front. Most of the town remains flooded. The entire boardwalk, along with the stores, the movies, the hotels, the shops, the rides, the attraction, my entire childhood was devoured by the sea. Anyone ever know why the Carousel Bar back at 43rd Street had its name, was the Carousel Bar? Do you guys remember that? Carousel Bar? This is the carousel that was located where the Carousel Bar was. Now it's the Point, I believe. But it was made by Denzel and Company. It was, these horses were worth tens of thousands of dollars. They were hand carved by Denzel in Germantown. The museum is lucky enough to have one horse left. But everything was scooped up and dispatched to the fire. The attraction is what most people remember about Sea Isle before the storm. And you ever wonder, again, how the Carousel Bar got its name? On March 8th, the evacuation of the community begins at daybreak and continues all day. Navy and Coast Guard helicopters ferry most women and children offshore. That is when I got out. Men have the option to go with their families or assist with the town to clean up. Most men stay and help the community. It was a much different place. Interesting, when I was going through photographs, I got a hold of this photograph. It was by Gail Fisher Her dad took it. She was a teacher at Dennis Township. And I sent it into the New Jersey State Police. As you can see, it shows people getting off the helicopter, but we have a trooper here standing guard. And that trooper was identified as Richard Jankowski. He was about 2 weeks into his new job as a trooper. So you know how that works. Go out and get wet. Yeah, go ahead, you know. Anyway, he had a very illustrious, he had a very illustrious career. He retired after 35 years or so. He was a lieutenant colonel. He was second in command of the state police. Here he is 2 weeks in. A welcome center and telephone bank is established at the Ocean View Firehouse, and residents are placed with local offshore families and residents or make arrangements to travel to stay with their family. Dennis Township and Woodbine, people who didn't know people, opened their houses and their hearts and let all our residents come and stay. Now, I was lucky. I went to Philadelphia. I have a story about that in my first book, how I got off the island. But while the evacuation was underway, a fire strikes a large residence on 45th Street, and there's no water pressure to put it out in the fire hydrants. However, quick-thinking firemen draw water from the endless supply in the manholes and storm drains. The building is a total loss, but the fire does not spread. The town is saved. 1962, a bunch of guys, all mostly World War II veterans, they were heroes. Although the rain has stopped, the surf and tide remain extremely high. Additional buildings are destroyed. As the tide recedes, the flooding finally starts to drop. Subsequent tides are starting to diminish as the Northeast moves on. The aftermath, the tidal flooding covered virtually all of the city's developed area. The barrier island was, quote, overtopped and breached. That is a New Jersey Department of Engineering, whatever term. The breaching resulted in the total near destruction of northern Sea Isle City, Whale Beach, and Strathmere. As you can see, this is from about First Street looking into Sea Isle, looking south. You can see where all the houses were here, and the beach and the pilings. This is Landis Avenue, and you can see the houses that were picked up and moved by the ocean. Again, the area was overtopped and breached as the waves broke and they came over the island into the bay. Building foundations to the left and the right, meadows were deposited. Landis Avenue had to be dug out because it was about 4 or 5 feet deep in sand. Here we are at the same place, only we're looking towards Ocean City. This is the Dolphin Motel. Somehow, some of it survived. The gentleman who owned it was Rudy Plappert, and he carted it over across the street where it's the condominiums. But this is what it looked like. This is Landis Avenue. This is where the dunes are roughly now. Okay. Elsewhere, oceanfront damage was extremely severe. 2,272 residents, buildings were damaged by flooding. So that's pretty much everybody in town had damage. Of that, and besides that, I should say, 668 residences and buildings had structural damage that were uninhabitable. And then 280 were totally destroyed, just not there anymore. Here's a picture of 42nd Street. This is the old trading post. I don't know for some of the longtime residents. This is 42nd and the beach. Here's a truck carting the stuff away. And you can see exactly what the beachfront looked like. That's all the attractions, the rides, the boardwalk, right there. Here's your picture. Landis Avenue at 28th Street looking. Here's St. Rita's over here. Houses were just in the middle of the street and whatnot. So they had to get rid of them. So they were immediately raised as they were safety hazards and health hazards. And the roadway had to be reopened. The only part of the boardwalk that survived were the concrete piers that held up the boardwalk. We did something. Ruh-roh. Try it this way. There we go. As you can see, these are the piers that held up the boardwalk. Here is obviously a building. This was at 40th Street, so this was kind of right here, this pavilion. Everything got knocked away. You can see how it's leaning and all. But this had a boardwalk. These were all stores. It was kind of sad. Most beachfront homes were either damaged beyond repair or simply non-existent. Some buildings were picked up and carried through town into the meadows towards the Garden State Parkway. Very, very few people had flood insurance. Again, there was no FEMA, so people didn't have the opportunity to complain about the tents that they were getting. The community is overrun by debris from destroyed homes, boardwalk, stores, amusements, and attractions. So this is the site of the Sea Isle City Beach House right now, and the bathrooms. This is 44th and the boardwalk. This is the old garage that they just tore down maybe 20 years ago, yeah, just about 20 years ago. This is 44th Street. This is the beach. This is my backyard. The hedge survives to this day. And that's Mike's house, and that's Mike's house, and that was Dewey's house, and that's Carmen's Got Crabs. And on St. Joseph's Day, now I was brought up that your feast day, my name is Joseph, your feast day is a big day, so I remember it clearly. 43rd Street was opened up on March 19th, 1962. The feast day of St. Joseph. What they had to do was you had to remove the debris to your yard. Homeowners had to get all the debris to where they could be reached by this long arm. So we had the old excursion house we were talking about had a basketball court on the 3rd floor. The basketball part of the basketball court with the line still on it were in my backyard, and we had to break it up and cart it to where the long arm could get it and put it in the dump trucks. And they were carted to a giant bonfire. Evacuated residents were allowed back starting in mid-March. Utility service was operational, although water was not potable. Water for consumption was distributed throughout the community in cartons and cans. Now, the cartons were from Civilian Defense, if you're old enough to remember that. And the cans were GI issue, government issue. And my father, of course, had a can of water, and we put it in the refrigerator. And the 70s come and the water's still there, and the 80s come and the water's still there. 90s come, the water's still there, Dad passes away. 2000s come, Mom's still at the house, water's in the refrigerator. Mom passes. The water is currently in my refrigerator. And there is a lake can in the museum. All right, in Ocean View, here's the residents lining up to get on the buses that brought you back into Sea Isle. Before being dropped off at home, everyone was brought to the hospital, Mercy Hospital, where you received a tetanus shot. Now, what was cool about it being a kid was, I was scared to death. So I'm getting a tetanus shot, and we're all queued up in line. And Dr. Houck, who was a major league player, another hero, was behind the door. And every time a young child would come out, he would bolt from behind the door, jab you with the needle, get the tetanus shot, and you had it before you even knew what happened, like lightning. So that's how I got the tetanus shot, as did most of the kids in Sea Isle. Here is, again, 42nd Street, looking towards Ocean City. It's from the, actually 43rd, this is at the site of the Point, the Carousel Bar. Very heavy equipment was brought into the town to help with the cleanup. The drawbridge at 44th Street was taxed to capacity. Additionally, the drawbridge had been serving as a dam, creating a log jam for all the debris from 43rd Street North that was pushed by the Northeast. This compromised the integrity of the bridge, and a new bridge and entryway in the Sea Isle were designed and operational by November of '63. For health and safety reasons, a fire is started at the end of Central Avenue. Now, the end of Central Avenue was 59th Street, where the Dealey Field is. And that bonfire, it was determined by the city fathers that the cost of fines for having an open air fire was less than the cost to truck the vast amount of debris offshore. So they said, yeah, fine us, we're doing this. The fire was also more time efficient. The fire burned continually from March till mid-May. And as you went offshore, you could see it. There was a lot going on. I hear some thunder, so I'm trying to do what I can. All right, another shot of 42nd Street between Lanus and Pleasure. Come on. Schools eventually reopened and classes resumed. Residents were allowed free access through the community. Sand dunes were brought the entire, sand dunes along the entire beachfront were gone. Now, okay, I'm a kid. Mom has enough problems. Dad's working for the city. He works sun up to sundown. Mom's trying to do what she can with the house to get it clean. So the door opens, me and my brother head out, and we had a ball. We went through every old house. I remember sitting in bed with Lenny's brother, and we're laying there, and the front of the house is completely gone, and we're just looking there. The police had their hands full. State police were here. I do remember a National Guardman in full battle uniform. It was a magnificent day, spring day. He's in full battle uniform, and his rifle had a bayonet on it. Okay, remember the sand dunes at the very, very beginning on Pleasure Avenue? This is 7616 Pleasure. As you can see, there is no more sand dunes. As you can see, there's no more Pleasure Avenue. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a sand dune for the entire length of the island. The buildings that survived the storm that are in the dune right away, and the buildings on the ocean side of the dune are immediately condemned and razed. The center of Sea Isle, the dune passed over, is paved over, and that's where you get the promenade. With profound limited government assistance, but with incredible self-reliance, the town is rebuilt because FEMA, again, was not in existence. Now, how was this all funded? Okay, remember this photograph and all this land? From 71st Street, Lanus Avenue, the entire beachfront, much of the area was sold to developers by the city to pay for the cleanup. So, come on. Does anyone ever wonder why Skimmer Weekend? Who cares? What's Skimmer Weekend? In 1962, they had to get the season in. Now it's March. It's the end of March. You got April and May. Hello. And they come up with the idea of all the men are going to wear skimmer hats, you know, the old boater hats, and invite the people down. And that's what they did, and they started Skimmer Weekend. And it was a huge success. That was Harry Tracy and Sam Ludwig were the two people who did that. So that is the origins and what Skimmer Weekend is all about. Okay, here's an aerial view of the beach and boardwalk. Here's the remains of the boardwalk. This survived. This was a Ludwig's. This is where the Beach Patrol headquarters is now. You can see the Catholic Church. And here's the road out of town. You can see it's not there. And there's my house right there. So a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Again, the beach looking north. There's a before and after shot. This is what it looked like before. This is what it looked like after. It's taken from the same spot almost. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Okay, this is 64th Street and Pleasure. If you lived in that area, this is what it looked like. The sand dunes are not there. This is 60th Street, the street end. Does anyone have any questions? We'll be available afterwards. If you can see, I'm trying to get this in, and it is getting late.